On March 17, 2000, a fire broke out at a Philips semiconductor plant. Within hours, a major global production line ground to a dead halt. The immediate result was a massive, indefinite disruption in the supply of critical microchips. Two major telecom giants relied heavily on this specific facility for the internal components of their high-volume mobile handsets, Nokia and Ericsson. Nokia suffered zero material impact from the fire. They maintained their handset output and market supply entirely uninterrupted throughout the lengthy recovery period. Ericsson lost an estimated $400 million in handset sales. The cumulative competitive damage from those months of production disruption forced Ericsson to exit the handset business entirely. This severe divergence in outcomes had nothing to do with luck or real-time crisis management. It was dictated completely by the supply chain architectures each company had built before the crisis ever occurred. A supply chain optimized entirely for lean cost efficiency and synchronized just-in-time flows operates with zero slack. Because of that exact design, it is maximally fragile. Every dollar a company saves by stripping out buffer inventory or consolidating to a single supplier directly increases its vulnerability to disruption. It is a strict structural trade-off. Understanding how to manage that trade-off, knowing exactly where a network will break and how to construct flexible alternatives, is the precise mechanism of corporate survival. The primary error that causes lean supply chains to collapse is a categorization mistake. Managers routinely confuse recurrent risk with disruptive risk. Recurrent risk is the normal operational variability a system faces daily. Mapped out, we plot event probability against overall impact. Minor demand shifts, forecast errors, and routine transit delays belong in the high probability, low impact quadrant. They happen constantly, but damage is minor. Standard operational tools are built exclusively to manage this zone. Safety stock, predictive forecasting, and just-in-time replenishment are highly effective at absorbing daily variability. Disruptive risks belong in the exact opposite corner. These are low-probability, systemic events that completely sever supply flows. Pandemics, geopolitical embargoes, and major natural disasters, like the 2011 Thai floods that paralyzed global hard drive production. Efficiency tools fail outright here. A calculated safety stock designed to absorb a 2-day shipping delay is useless if your sole supplier's factory burns down and requires 6 months to rebuild. Applying a margin of error tool to a catastrophic systemic shock does not mitigate the risk. It simply guarantees a complete structural collapse the moment that thin buffer runs out. To measure how a system fails and recovers, we use Sheffey and Rice's tool, the Disruption Recovery Profile. It maps a disruption chronologically across 5 phases: the pre-disruption baseline, initial disruption degradation, the full disruption trough, recovery phase, and the new normal equilibrium. Resilience on this graph is quantified by 2 specific vectors: resistance, which dictates how deep that trough goes, and recovery speed, which measures how quickly the line climbs back. When we apply this framework to Ericsson during the Albuquerque fire, we see their single-source policy caused an immediate vertical drop on the graph. Because Ericsson operated with total reliance on that single Philips facility, they hit full disruption with zero resistance. They had no qualified alternative suppliers to activate. Nokia's pre-disruption strategy was entirely different. They deliberately maintained active relationships with pre-qualified alternative suppliers in Japan and the US, taking a slight hit on volume discounts to preserve options. When Nokia detected the anomaly in their supply flow, their procurement teams were able to switch routing to those backups within days rather than weeks. Compare Nokia's curve against Ericsson's. Nokia's performance line barely dipped below normal operational capacity. The shape of a company's recovery curve is not determined by executive decisions made during a crisis. It is dictated entirely by the structural investments they chose to make during the pre-disruption phase. There are exactly 2 ways to flatten that disruption curve: redundancy and flexibility. Redundancy is a pure insurance policy. It means holding excess backup inventory, paying for spare factory capacity, or maintaining idle supplier relationships. The financial flaw of redundancy is that it is a sunk cost during the 99% of the time your supply chain is operating normally. It serves zero operational purpose unless disaster strikes. Flexibility is the strategic alternative. Instead of paying to stockpile goods, you build the capability to rapidly reconfigure production, sourcing, and logistics on the fly. A primary method for engineering flexibility is postponement. This means keeping your product in a raw, standardized form and delaying specific customization until the absolute latest point in the network. Hewlett-Packard utilized this in their printer supply chain. Instead of manufacturing distinct models centrally, HP shipped undifferentiated core hardware globally. They added the country-specific power supplies and localized instruction manuals only once the units reached regional distribution centers. A single, standardized inventory pool could suddenly absorb demand shocks across multiple international markets. The other half of flexibility is agility, which requires end-to-end data visibility. You cannot reconfigure a network if you cannot see the bottleneck forming tiers deep in your sub-supplier base. Flexibility yields a consistent financial return in everyday operations. A supply chain that can pivot instantly during a disaster is the same supply chain that can rapidly capture a new market trend. The crisis resilience is a byproduct of daily competitive agility. In 2021, the global semiconductor shortage scaled these exact structural risks up to a macroeconomic level, paralyzing the North American auto industry. Over decades, automakers had optimized their procurement to run as lean as possible, effectively attempting to apply tight, just-in-time rules to automotive-grade microchips. This logic failed because automotive chips have a rigid 26-week physical fabrication cycle and rely on a highly concentrated geographic supply base in Asia. No amount of emergency procurement can compress that physical production timeline. The impact on Ontario's automotive cluster was immediate and severe. Major assembly lines across the Windsor, Oakville, and Ingersoll corridors experienced cascaded, extended shutdowns. Because the automotive supply network lacked strategic decoupling points to buffer long lead components, an upstream chip shortage instantly translated into massive downstream output failure. Tens of thousands of workers were idled over a missing $20 component. The industry is now implementing a hybrid strategy called Agility, the mandate to remain lean where demand is predictable, but heavily buffered and agile where disruption risk is high. This physical restructuring is supported by modern digital tools like AI risk sensing networks that continuously scan global logistics data, weather patterns, and financial signals to detect upstream distress before a shortage begins. Companies also deploy supply chain digital twins, real-time computational models of their actual networks. They run hundreds of simulated disruption scenarios to locate their hidden vulnerabilities and optimize their buffers long before a real crisis hits. Supply chain resilience is governed by an inherent structural trade-off. You will pay for it eventually. You can either pay a calculated premium for flexibility before the disruption, or you will pay an existential cost during it.